Hello and welcome back to A Shark's Perspective. So you're trying to change someone's mind. It might be your boss, your company, a client, or a consumer. Who or whatever it is, are you simply pushing more and more, like with your advertisements as an example? Or are you first identifying the roadblocks that might be in your way and that you need to mitigate in order to move forward? Do you know how to be a catalyst and change anyone's mind? Jonah Berger is a marketing professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania and an internationally best-selling author of Contagious, Invisible Influence in his newest, The Catalyst. And on this episode, we'll discuss inciting change, catalyst, obstacles, hurdles, fear, how to change the mind of a client, consumer, or an organization, William Wallace, freemium and lemonade stands, butterflies, and a lot more. So let's tune in to a mind-changing professor with a shark who's a catalyst for changing the world on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Dr. Berger, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. Tell us, if you will, a little bit about your background story and your career to date.
Sure. So in my day job, I'm a marketing professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. I've been there now for 13 years. I did my PhD at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, and I do a lot of research on word of mouth, social influence, why products, ideas, and behaviors catch on, as well as change. And so I help a range of companies and organizations change everything from minds to organizational culture. And I'm excited about sort of research and science as well as practice in that area.
So obviously I'm a big fan of the books Contagious and Invisible Influence, and I'm just as excited about The Catalyst. But just a couple of quick questions about Contagious and Invisible Influence. I mean, these were both New York Times bestsellers. This amazing work that you've done. But when you look back on the two books in particular, what did you see as sort of the biggest standout now that you look back on them? Because I know in Contagious, you really talk about what makes things popular. And then in Invisible Influence, it helps ideas and things become more persuasive. You know, when you look back on the two of them, what is sort of the standout for both topics with you?
Yeah, I think I got very lucky with Contagious. It came out at a very opportune time. Everyone was becoming more and more interested in social media. Everyone realized that traditional sort of paid as well as owned media was less effective than it used to be. And lots of companies and organizations were trying to figure out, well, how do we get our products and ideas and services to catch on? And so I think I got quite fortunate in that sense. And then that book came out at a time when people were very interested in that topic. People often think it's a social media book. It's not. It's really about why people talk about and share things, but really provides a framework for thinking about, well, why do people talk about and share one product, one service, one idea, and how can I use that to get my message out there? And so that book is now out and got a million copies in over 35 languages around the world. It's really allowed me to learn a lot about marketing as well as business. I have a PhD in marketing, but I've worked in business for a few years, but I definitely did not have the exposure to the breadth of organizations that I got a chance to work with after that book. Everything from big tech companies like the Apples and the Googles of the world to small startups and everything in between. And I really learned a lot about marketing and business from seeing and working with these different organizations. Seeing different challenges, many organizations facing the same challenges but from different angles. And so it really got me a chance to learn a lot, sort of on-the-job learning that I've greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I can imagine. So let's talk about Catalyst then. What was the inspiration for that book? What made you think I need to write about roadblocks?
Yeah, as I was mentioning, have gotten a chance to work with many companies, organizations, would often suggest a set of solutions, some of which were in Contagious and some of which weren't. And I realized that at the core, almost everyone that I was working with had a similar challenge, which is they had something they wanted to change. So if it was a sales or marketing type function, they wanted to change the customer, or consumer, or client's mind. If it was a leader of an organization, they wanted to change organizational culture. If it was employees, they wanted to change their boss's mind. Startups wanted to change entire industries. And so again and again, people had something they wanted to change, but change was always very hard. Right? People would push and they'd prod and they cajole and they'd try to persuade and it often wouldn't work. And so what I wondered is, well, could there be a better way? Essentially, could we be doing it wrong? And what I realized is we often take a certain approach when we try to change minds or try to change organizations. And that is we try to push. right? We try to move things in a particular direction. We add sort of compelling force in that direction. So we provide more reasons, we provide more facts and figures, we make a presentation, we remind people why they should do something in particular. And that intuition's clear, right? The reason we think that works is because it works in the physical world. If I'm sitting in front of a chair and I want that chair to move in a particular direction, pushing that direction is a great way to go, right? I push in that direction, it goes. And so we think, well, if we push people in a particular direction, they'll go. The problem with people is they're not like chairs. Unlike chairs, when we push people, they don't just go, they often push back. And so what I realize is, well, we've got to take a different approach. And so I talk to a range of types of individuals, from great leaders and really successful startups to the best salespeople, everything from hostage negotiators and substance abuse counselors. And again, I saw the same types of practices at work. They weren't saying, what can I do to change someone's mind? They were saying instead something slightly, subtly, but importantly different. Why hasn't that person changed already? In a sense, what's stopping them? And so great catalysts don't push more. They don't add more reasons. They figure out what are those barriers to change and how do they mitigate them. And so that's what the book at its core is all about, right? How do we identify those barriers, those obstacles, those roadblocks that are often preventing change? How do we mitigate them and make change easier and more likely?
So dive in a little bit further in how you did the research. I'd love to understand how you as a researcher approach this. Did you do it from the standpoint of needing to address change, or did you look at catalyzation as the solution and then look for evidence to support that argument?
Honestly, what happened is I was working with a particular client and we tried something and it failed. And so
Yeah,
I was trying to sit there, I
there
was
you go.
sitting there going, well, why isn't this working? And so I started to try to come up with some alternate ideas. We tried a few things. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. I refined them. I worked on with another client. They worked better the next time. And so I started to see some patterns of things that were working and things that weren't. And as an academic, what I tend to do in that situation is, okay, I go to the literature, right? I look at prior research that's been done. Is there support for one of these types of approaches versus another? I also talked to some people, both at companies I'd worked with as well as ones I hadn't worked with, to get some intuition about how they face similar problems. And so it just sort of, in some sense, came together, both what wasn't working and what was. And so part of what I've tried to do in this book is sort of codify some of the patterns
Mm-hmm.
that are both observable in the literature as well as in actual practice, help identify some of these key roadblocks that come up again and again, and help provide at least some directions on how to solve them.
So let's unpack then a little bit further, if you will, how you are seeing clients and advertisers today push. What did push mean to you? Because I'm with you as you explain that, especially as how we look at advertising and we lead with everything about features and benefits and then wonder why customers of any kind, whether it's a consumer himself or another business, why they don't react to that push message.
Yeah, I mean, so let's pick on advertising
Yeah.
for a second. And in particular, let's pick on shampoo because I think shampoo is easy to pick on. So think about the last shampoo ad you saw, right? If you're like most people, it's probably a man or a woman with short or long flowy hair, depending on gender. That person then used the shampoo in the commercial, and then they got an attractive spouse, right? Every version of a shampoo commercial you've seen, they get an attractive spouse at the end. Why? Because if they got an ugly spouse, no one would use that shampoo, right? And that ad, it's a silly example, but that ad is basically every persuasive attempt we see from traditional advertising where people love the product or they love the service, or we talk about all the reasons why this is the right thing to do. Leaders, as we present things to organizations, we say, hey guys, do this, we should do this, we should be more innovative. I can't tell you how many meetings I've been to where the speaker before me who's at the company says, we need to break more rules, we need to be bigger risk takers, right? We all suggest these things for other people to do, but often pushing doesn't work, right? Sure, we want the boss to adopt a particular project or initiative, but give them more reasons why to do it isn't necessarily going to work because they're often going to push back. As we'll talk about, one of the key barriers in the framework is this idea of reactance, right? When we push people, they don't just go along, they push back. And understanding how that works and why that works, what the core reason why people push back, is really important for helping us think through our other approaches as well.
Well, then obviously that's a perfect transition. Let's talk about the roadblocks that you've seen. I think the five roadblocks are reactance, endowment, distance, uncertainty, and corroborating evidence. What are the one or two that sort of stand out the most as the biggest impediment for people?
Yeah, so first I would say, the 5 roadblocks are what you suggested. We put them together. They actually spell a word, which is reduce, and that's exactly what good
Yeah.
catalysts do. They don't push harder. They don't provide more reasons. They reduce the barriers or the obstacles to change. And one that we just started talking about, so I'll stick on it, is the idea of reactance. And the idea very simply there is when we push people, they push back. They don't just go along, they push back. Essentially, people have an innate anti-persuasion radar that looks in the surrounding environment, and when they feel like someone is trying to change their mind, someone's trying to persuade them, their defenses go up and they shoot down those incoming projectiles, right? They either avoid the message, so an ad comes on television, we change the channel. A salesperson calls us, we hang up the phone. They avoid it, they ignore it, or even worse, they counter argue. Right? Yes, they're sitting there listening, but what they're really doing is thinking about all the reasons why what you're suggesting is wrong, right? Which means that when you push people to do something, often they don't go along, they push back. People love freedom and autonomy, right? We love to feel like we have choice. We love to feel like our own lives are driven by ourselves. Why did I buy a particular product or use a particular service? Well, I bought that product because I like it. I use that service because it's the best fit for me. But the problem is that when we suggest someone to do something, even if it's something they already want to do, it impinges on their ability to see that choice as driven by themselves. Right? Let's say we're the boss and we say in a meeting, "Hey, everybody, we need to be more innovative." Well, it's probably the case that some people in the room wanted to be more innovative. They wanted to speak up more in meetings. They wanted to be more risk-taking. But now when they do something like that, they don't know if they're doing it because the boss suggested it or because they wanted to do it in the first place. And so because of that, they have a tendency to push back and not want to do it. We see this in our personal lives often, right? Our spouse, our partner, our friend suggests something we may have already wanted to do, but because it came from them, we're like, oh, no, I don't want to do what they wanted to do, right? It feels like it's giving in. And so rather than push people, rather than persuade people, we have to figure out how to get people to persuade themselves. And so a lot of this chapter, I talk about sort of 4 different ways to get people to persuade themselves. I'm happy to talk about a couple here,
Yeah.
but it's really about allowing for autonomy, giving people more of that sense of freedom and control.
Tell us a little bit more then.
Yeah, sure. So, one of the ways that I talk about dealing with reactants is to provide what I'll call a menu. And a great way to think about this is as the following. So, imagine you're a consultant and you're presenting to a client and you're pitching them on a particular direction or a particular idea. Often that client spends much of the meeting thinking about why we talked about why all the reasons why what you're suggesting is wrong. They think about all the reasons why it won't work, why it's going to be too expensive, why, yeah, that might have worked at the other types of businesses you've worked with, but not your own, right? Same if we're a marketer, same if we're a leader, right? The audience is sitting there thinking about all the reasons why we're wrong. And if we suggest one idea, one direction, one solution, that's what they're going to do. But if instead we present multiple, instead of giving them one option, we give them a choice, we give them at least 2 or 3, it subtly shifts their mindset and their role. Because now rather than sitting there going, okay, what's all the reasons why this is a bad idea?
Mm-hmm.
Implicitly, what they're doing is they're comparing the different options you suggested, figuring out which one is the best fit for them. And by doing that comparison and thinking about which is the best one for them, they're much more likely to choose one at the end of the day, right? Think again to our personal lives. If someone asks, oh, what do you want to do this weekend? You say, I want to go to a movie, right? Often they'll say, oh, I don't want to go to a movie. Or, oh, it's so nice outside. Or, oh, why don't we do something else, right? They shoot down your suggestion. If you instead say, we could go to a movie or we could go out to dinner, now they're going to be like, okay, well, which one of those do I like? And now I'm much more likely to go along with one of them at the end of the day. And so whether we're trying to get the boss to do something, providing a couple options, whether we're trying to do a client to do something, providing a couple options, in some sense it's guided choice. It's not infinite choices. It's not 100 different options. It's not 50 different options. It's not 30 different options. It's not an overwhelming amount of choice, but it's a few options, giving people that feeling of freedom and autonomy like they're participating. And because they're participating, they're much more likely to persuade themselves.
So smart. Let's go to 2 other letters. I feel like I'm on Wheel of Fortune that I wanted to quickly talk about. One was endowment, and people are wedded to what they're already doing. What sort of a way to get people to unchain? That's one of the ones that I feel that people are so locked in to historically either gut based or what they think is data driven decision on it. And then they get locked into doing the same thing over and over again. How do you sort of, from a high level overcome that?
Yeah, so stepping back for a second, you're exactly right, right? We have an emotional attachment to
Exactly.
the thing we've been doing. And that's important because, when we're trying to get some people to switch, we're not only getting them to do something new, we have to get them to let go of something old, right?
Exactly.
That's the difference between, if you don't have a lawnmower and I'm asking you to buy a lawnmower, I have to convince you that my lawnmower is a good one, but I don't have to get you to let go of something, which is very different than if I'm trying to get you to let go of your old lawnmower to buy a new lawnmower. If I'm trying to get you to let go of your old service provider to use a new service provider, because two things are true. One, people hate new things, right? People are neophobic. They're uncertain. They're uncertain that new thing is going to be better, but they're also very much attached to the old thing. And we can talk about uncertainty in a
That was
second and
that was
switching
the
costs.
other letter. Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, talk about it in a second. But what we can't forget is we're attached to the old stuff. Why? We know it really well, so we're less uncertain. But we also just have emotional attachment. We value things we're doing already more than new things. There's some great research, for example, that shows in a home buying context, for example, people value their home more the longer they've lived there, even above market price. So if you've lived in your home for 15 years, you value it more than if you lived there for 10 years, even controlling for the actual market price. Why? Well, you become attached to it. You know it, you love it, your memories are attached to it. You can't imagine someone else wouldn't value it the same. And so there's lots of research on what's called the endowment effect, which essentially what shows is we value old things more than new things. We value what we're already doing, what we're already thinking, what we're already using, what we already own. If it's mine, we value it more. So imagine, for example, I said, hey, here's a mug. It holds coffee or it holds tea. How much would you be willing to pay for this mug? You might look at it. You might say, okay, I'm willing to pay, I don't know, $2, $3, something like that, whatever it might be. But if I instead gave you the mug, I said, this is your mug. You can hold on to it. By the way, if I asked you to sell it to someone else, how much would you be willing to sell it for? You would think those two numbers should be the same, right? The mug's exactly the same. It holds the same amount of coffee, same amount of tea. It has the same logo on the front. It's exactly the same mug. The thing itself is the same, but people often value it at least 2 times more if it's already theirs. The mug they own already, they want much more to sell that mug than they're willing to pay to buy it in the first place. And so that's really the challenge when we're trying to change someone's mind, right? We've got to get them to let go of that old thing. We often think that sticking with the old thing is costless. It won't require any effort to change. It's often not as costless as we think. And so we have to get them to let go of that old thing and overcome or ease that endowment that's occurring.
So the other was U, the letter U, and the reduce methods, and talking about uncertainty. When people deal with fear, and I can't tell you the number of times I've dealt with people who were either risk averse or scared of change. When you approach somebody like that, it's different. It's kind of like we were talking about with gut reaction versus data driven, or having that emotional versus a clinical way of looking at it. When there's fear, it's always emotional for the most part. I say for the most part, I'm trying to think when it wouldn't be fear or when it wouldn't be
Yeah.
emotional, but it's always an emotional reaction. And that takes a different approach, I'm certain that you've uncovered as well, to how to incite change.
Yeah, so I like that you use that word fear. And so think about a particular situation. Imagine you're running late for a meeting and you don't know whether you're going to make the meeting or not. So your plane is delayed. You're not sure you're going to land in time. You're stuck in traffic. You're not sure you're going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
That feeling is really bad, right? We're worried we're not going to make the meeting. We're scared. We're anxious about not making the meeting. What's interesting is the worst thing that could happen in that situation is what? Well, the worst thing is that we don't make the meeting, right? And so you would think that once we get to the point where we know we're not going to make the meeting, in a sense, that's the worst point, right? Because now, oh my goodness, now we know we're not going to make the meeting. That's the moment that's terrible. But often when we figure out that we're not going to make that meeting, the plane is so delayed, the traffic is so bad, something interesting happens, right? We actually feel better after that point than we felt before. Because when you talk about fear, what fear really is at its core is fear is uncertainty. We don't know, right? It's not that people dislike the bad thing. They certainly do, right? They dislike the bad thing. But what's even worse is not knowing if that bad thing is going to happen. And so in some sense, uncertainty is the worst part of fear. Right? If we were certain about it, we still wouldn't like it, but we wouldn't feel uncertain. So that's a big challenge, right? Anytime there's change, there's what's called switching costs. So if I ask you to buy a new product, there's a monetary cost, right? You have to shell out some money to buy a new phone or buy a new car. But there's also often time and energy costs. It takes some time to figure out what new router to buy. It takes time to install new software. It takes effort to make sure it works with your existing systems. All of those are costs, but not only are there costs, in the first place that would be bad, people don't like costs, but think about when the costs are and when the benefits are, right? The costs of change are often upfront. Before I get to use this new phone, I have to pay for it. Before I get to see if the software is any good, I have to spend the time to install it. And so costs are upfront and benefits are often downstream. They're later, but costs are often very certain. They're going to cost at least this much, and benefits are often uncertain. Sure, this new system might be better. Certain this new way of doing business might be better. Certain the boss approaches might be better to what we've been doing, but it also might not. And so I'm going to be very reticent to give up a sure thing that I know already for some potential uncertain benefit later. And that's what I call the cost benefit timing gap, right? And so that's really what that chapter is all about. How do we mitigate that gap, make people feel more certain, have them experience the offering, and so make them more willing to change?
Well, one thing I have found in working in corporate America for a lot of years is there are not a lot of William Wallaces out there who are braveheartish enough to jump into the uncertain, into the unknown. And it is just, customers react differently though. They're not waiting on them to overcome fear. And I think that's something that I've learned from a lot of people watching them learn the wrong way. So I'm kind of curious, is there anything that you uncovered in your research that went against maybe your initial thoughts going into it? Was there anything that was maybe a pleasant surprise out of it that you saw that wasn't part of this process?
Yeah, I mean, so sticking on uncertainty for a second.
Sure.
So there was a particular approach that often works, but people tend to think it's very narrow. So some of your listeners may have heard of the idea of freemium,
Yeah.
right? So if you think about Dropbox, for example, right?
Yeah.
So
Perfect.
Dropbox built $1 billion business on giving away things for free. You might say, well, that's crazy. How can you make money giving away things for free? Everyone from a 10-year-old with a lemonade stand knows to make money, you got to charge people for something. But what they did is they gave a trial version, essentially a free version of their platform away for free. You could store up to 2 gigabytes of things on the site for free. You want more than that, you have to pay. Now, what that did is that resolved in some sense people's uncertainty. Because sure, Dropbox might say Dropbox is great. Of course, Dropbox would say that. Dropbox wouldn't say it's terrible, just like the ad we talked about before. Of course, an ad is going to say a product or service is great. But no one's better at convincing you than yourself. And so what Dropbox did is say, hey, don't trust us. You might be worried about our safety. You might be not trusting us. Come on, check it out. If you like it, you stored all your files there, you're going to be willing to pay more money for it. You're going to be willing to upgrade to that premium version. And so in the book, I talk about a bunch about freemium, how to implement freemium, how do we make sure we pick the right thing to give away for free and not to give away too much of it, but also not to give away too little. That's the key when we think about freemium, right? If we give away too much, people never pay for the paid version. If we give away too little, they won't have the experience. But many people said when we talked about freemium, oh, that's so great, but I can't use it. Sure, if I was Dropbox and my my marginal cost was zero, sure if I'm the New York Times, sure if I'm Skype, sure if I'm LinkedIn, all these sort of software as a service models or things where there's already a platform and the fixed costs are what they are. And so it doesn't really cost, to the New York Times, they give away an article for free. It doesn't cost them more money. The article was already written. And so every person that sees it for free is basically costless to them. And so you might think, okay, works really well for certain types of businesses, online businesses where it's easy to give things away for free. But what if I'm a doctor? How do I use freemium? What if I'm a healthcare system? How do I use freemium? What if I'm a fleet management company that I manage trucks for Amazon and other businesses? How can I give away something for free? But at its core, freemium is actually part of a broader principle. It's not about a free and a premium version. It's about lowering that upfront barrier to trial. We talked about switching costs. It's about figuring out, well, what are those switching costs and how to mitigate them, whether it's time, money, or effort, whatever it might be. Think about test drives for a car, for example. They're not freemium, right? There's no free version and there's no premium version. It's not like you get a free version of the car and then you pay money and get the premium version of the car. A test drive, you just sit in the car, but what it does is it lowers the upfront cost. Imagine if someone said, hey, you have to pay $30,000 to buy this new car, and only after you've paid us the money will we let you see if it's any good. Right? Most of us that are trying to sell people services or even sell people products, that's what we're asking people to do. We're saying, hey, trust me that this is good. Pay the money up front, and only then will we let you see if you like it. Test drives lower that barrier. Right? It doesn't make it any less expensive to buy the car, but it makes it cheaper to experience the offering. And so at the core, that's what lowering the barrier to uncertainty really is. It's how do we make it cheaper for people to experience the value behind something? And once they've experienced that value, be more likely to use it.
So I'm curious now, as an author, I've interviewed a lot of authors who go through sort of a cathartic experience, as they really deep dive into the research. Did you find this applied to you as well? What did you sort of identify what your personal biggest roadblocks were to change as well? And are they sort of along the lines of what you found in your research?
In some sense, you can learn a lot about people with by what they do and what they focus on.
Yeah,
I have the status quo bias more than anyone. I am attached to old things.
sure.
I am scared of new things. I buy the same pants. If I can buy that same pair of pants, I buy them again. But once the new thing gets in the house and I've tried it on for a while, I love it. I'm susceptible just like everyone else is. And so I think it's less about sort of individual differences. Are you susceptible or not? It's about going, wow, we're all susceptible to these biases. We all overvalue things. We're all scared of new things. Some of us more than others. Some of us more in certain domains than others. How can we be better salespeople and marketers and managers and leaders by understanding those barriers? How can we change minds and organizations by understanding why people are reticent to change and removing them?
Well, Jonah, I ask this of all my guests. None of them are as fanatical about swimming with sharks as I am, but I must ask you, what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
I'm going to go with a hammerhead shark because I think they're pretty amazing.
There you go. Hell of a change agent. So, Jonah,
Yep.
it's that special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
I'm ready. Shoot.
All right, here we go. Number 1, being a highly respected marketer and marketing professor or being a highly respected author?
Oh, wow.
I mean, you've
That's
nailed them
tough.
both. So,
I think I love doing research, and at the end of the day, that's what I'm better at. I'm a better researcher than I am an author. But what I think is unfortunate is sometimes if research no one reads it, it doesn't matter. And so I think one reason I've written this book and my other books is to really try to help share the wonderful research that academics have done with a larger audience. There's some really powerful tools out there that we've uncovered, but if no one ever reads them, it's not very valuable and it doesn't help other people change. And so my goal here is really to help people change whatever those things are in their life that have been hard for them to get around.
number 2, then, looking back now on your previous books, if you had to pick your favorite child, Contagious or Invisible Influence?
Oh, that's easy. So I love Invisible Influence. I think it's a better written book in some ways. I've hopefully learned something a little bit in the process, but Contagious is still my darling so far. It was my first one and still my darling.
Good choice. Number 3, Stanford University or the Wharton School of Business at the University of Penn?
These are tough choices you're
Very
asking
tough.
me to make. I'm going to go with Stanford just because many of my formative years were there and they
Sure.
made me who I am, though I owe a great debt to the Wharton School as well. It's helped me forward me along also. But, Stanford got me earlier. They were nice enough to let me in, and I got a great education.
Yeah, the alma mater is never a bad wrong answer, or
Yeah.
a bad right answer. So, number 4, the monarch butterfly or the tiger swallowtail?
Oh, I'll go with Monarch Butterfly.
I think the monarch's on the cover. So, I'm not a butterfly expert, but when I was looking at monarch butterflies, it looked closest. Or do you know if it's any different?
I believe it is a monarch. What I also love the most about the cover is the brains inside the butterfly's wings.
Yes, I did like that.
I think that's a nice touch, hopefully.
Number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today, probably the toughest one you'll be asked at Wharton or Stanford: biscuits or cornbread?
I think that's an easy one. I'm going to go with cornbread.
Good man. So,
Yeah.
so Jonah, I'm really looking forward to yet another New York Times bestseller. But where can people find out more about you, read the books, keep up with what you're doing and your thought leadership, and more?
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I
Of course.
really appreciate it. The book is available wherever books are sold, so Amazon, Barnes & Noble, available as audiobook as well. People can find me on my website. That's just Jonah, Jonah, Berger, BERGER.com. There are lots of resources there, from how to change a boss's mind, how to change an organization, how to change a client's mind. And I'm also, of course, on LinkedIn and on Twitter at J1Berger.
Dr. Berger, it's been an honor, and thank you again for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thanks so much for having me.
So there was my conversation with Jonah Berger, a marketing professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania and an international best-selling author of Contagious, Invisible Influence, and his newest, The Catalyst. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, we spoke a lot about catalysts for change. He said, and I quote, "So great catalysts don't push more, they don't add more reasons. They figure out what are those barriers to change and how do they mitigate them." Great point. We've got to identify those barriers and obstacles to change in order to make change more likely. Then we dove a little bit further in reference to how advertising has been used as a catalyst. I love the reference to the shampoo commercial and how you wash your hair with shampoo in the ad, and then you gain the hot-looking companion as a result. Again, that goes to how we continue to push features and benefits on people and expect them to react in our favor. But do you ever think about how and why they react a certain way and why sometimes they push back? Likely no. You just hit them with more advertising and think eventually they'll fall your way once they succumb to better creative ad copy or, better ads in general. Look, advertising works or companies wouldn't do it, but understanding what drives true and better change is crucial to driving growth and better performance. You're trying to incite change. Just don't look at it as some sort of blunt force object with your ideas or your ads or something that people just don't want to see or hear. Second, in the book Catalyst, he identifies 5 key roadblocks to change: reactance, endowment, distance, uncertainty, and corroborating evidence, or simply REDUCE for short. It's reducing the barriers or obstacles to change. Just remember that often people don't go along, they push back. They bought the product because they liked it, not always because you pushed it. And people want a choice. Great point that we can use to drive performance as a conversion tactic, as well as give people a guided choice. Not an infinite number of options, but a few. He said, and I quote, "Give people that feeling of freedom and autonomy like they're participating. And because they're participating, they're much more likely to persuade themselves." Great point. Third, really love how he talks about when we are marketing or selling a product or service, or even just an idea, we need to take into account that people are wedded to what they're already doing. It's why a lot of people stick with the status quo and they make gut-based, emotional decisions and not data-driven ones. A lot of people are risk-averse and hold on to fear. They hold on to their emotional support blanket, their whoopee, and that's what they're used to doing. As he said, people have an emotional attachment to the thing they've been doing, and when we're trying to get people to switch to something new, we have to at least understand that they might have to let go of something old. People place value in the things they're doing already. That's the endowment effect, and that's why you've got to ease the endowment that's occurring in order to incite change. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. So let go of your own well-being. Be a catalyst for change in the world. Just keep coming back here and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.